Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be transferred to a new ward called Belsize, and we're diving deep into chapter 17 to understand what this move means for you as the reader.
Yeah, this chapter, it just throws us right into your emotional state, doesn't it? I mean, the anxiety just practically leaps off the page.
It really does, and there's this sense of I'm not ready for Belsize, even though it's supposedly a step towards recovery.
Yeah, it's almost like being told you're ready for a promotion, when you're still kind of fumbling with the basics.
Right, exactly, and you're struggling with the idea that Belsize is for the nearly well,
Yeah.
and you just don't see yourself in that category yet.
Yeah, and I think the presence of Joan in this chapter really underscores that feeling.
Right.
She's this model patient. She's thriving in Belsize. You even mentioned her walk privileges and, shopping trips into town.
So she's almost like a measuring stick then. Like her successes make you question your own progress.
That's a really insightful observation. I think it speaks to the pressure to perform recovery that can exist within institutions. Imagine the weight of that, especially when you're already feeling vulnerable.
And on top of all of this, there's this looming fear of shock treatment. It's absent at Belsize, at least initially, and you're clearly relieved.
Yeah, that relief is palpable. But it's also intertwined with the memory of what shock treatment was like in the previous ward. Kaplan, you describe the routine with a chilling clarity. The missing breakfast trays the quiet return of the patients.
It's almost like a ghost story whispered among the patients. And you even wonder how Dr. Nolan, who prescribes this treatment, can possibly understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end.
Yeah, that's such a powerful moment, questioning the authority of the very person in charge of your care. And I think that that seed of doubt, once planted, is really going to grow as the story unfolds.
So let's shift our focus a little bit to Belsize itself.
Hmm.
You describe the atmosphere as deceptively carefree. You've got patients like Dee Dee with her musical bell, with her confident demeanor, and then Mrs. Savage, who seems to have stepped right out of high society.
Yes. You even mentioned that anecdote about Mrs. Savage's debutante daughters and how her admittance to the asylum sort of disrupted their entire social season.
But, beneath this veneer of normalcy, the chapter is constantly reminding us of the reality this is an institution.
Yeah.
And you are acutely aware of that fact.
Yeah, and this creates this really fascinating tension between outward appearances and your internal state, right?
Yeah.
You're surrounded by people who on the surface seem well adjusted, but you're battling these invisible demons.
And then there's that incident with the magazine photo.
Yeah.
Other patients see a picture of a girl who looks like you, surrounded by boys at a party, and instantly assume it's you.
It's such a seemingly minor event, but think about the impact. It just reinforces your fear of being misjudged, even in a place that's meant for understanding.
It's interesting how your conversation with the night nurse really kind of shatters this facade of normalcy at Belsize. She's blunt, almost dismissive of your concerns.
Yeah, and what's particularly unsettling is how she insists on calling you Lady Jane, despite knowing your real name. It's as if your identity is irrelevant in this environment.
Absolutely. And then she describes the state place, a different institution for patients who don't recover. What did you make of that?
The state place seems to represent the bottom rung of this system, right? It's a bleak reminder that your future isn't guaranteed, and that things could get significantly worse.
Her words are almost like a warning hanging over you. How do you feel going to bed that night?
There's a palpable sense of dread, but then the next morning starts with a glimmer and hope. You describe waking up to sunshine, the sounds of breakfast being prepared. It feels like a normal day.
Except that normalcy is quickly shattered. You realize your breakfast tray is missing. It's a small detail, but...
But a loaded one. It signals that you're being treated differently, and it really sets the stage for the betrayal that's about to unfold.
When you inquire about the missing tray, the nurse delivers the bombshell. You're scheduled for shock treatment that day.
And the way the scene is described, from the maid's dismissive attitude to the nurse's just matter-of-fact tone, it all amplifies that sense of helplessness.
But the real blow comes with the realization that Dr. Nolan broke her promise. She assured you that there would be a warning before another treatment.
The trust between you and Dr. Nolan is completely shattered at this point. You feel betrayed, manipulated, utterly powerless.
You retreat to the alcove waiting for them to come and take you to the treatment room, but instead...
Dr. Nolan arrives and she tries to comfort you, right? Insisting that she is keeping her promise.
But her words are just so hollow at this point,
Yeah.
You're angry and scared and demanding reassurance, but it feels like clinging to that last shred of hope. even though, deep down it's probably futile.
It's heartbreaking, the way she wipes your face with a handkerchief. You know, it's a gesture that's both maternal and condescending at the same time. It just speaks volumes about the power imbalance at play here. And then she leads you away to the electrotherapy room. You describe the journey in such vivid detail, the echoing silence of the corridors, the faint antiseptic smell.
It almost feels like a sensory deprivation chamber, designed to strip away your individuality before you even reach the treatment room.
Exactly. You arrive at the waiting room and you encounter another patient. Mr. Anderson also scheduled for treatment, but the focus quickly shifts to Miss Huey, the imposing figure who administers the shock treatments.
You even point out her acne scars. It adds to this unsettling feeling.
I think that detail is really significant because it humanizes Miss Huey in a way, right? It reminds us that even those in positions of power are flawed, vulnerable individuals.
She leads you to the treatment room, and you catch glimpses of the equipment, the masked figures. It's all very clinical, very impersonal.
It's like being on an assembly line. You're stripped of your identity, reduced to just another patient. Miss Huey attempts to soothe you, telling you to bite down on something. And then darkness.
That abrupt ending just leaves us hanging, wondering what the experience is going to be like for you, how it will affect you. And it makes me think about electroconvulsive therapy in a broader context.
Yeah, it's important to remember that this was a common treatment for mental illness in the mid-20th century.
But it was also a highly controversial one, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And while the source material doesn't really delve into the medical rationale behind it, it's impossible to ignore the ethical considerations, especially in light of your experience.
Yeah, your experience really highlights the question of informed consent. Even if shock therapy was considered an acceptable treatment at the time, did you as the patient have a true understanding of the risks and benefits? Did you have the agency to make an informed decision about your own care?
And I think that's a question that resonates even today.
Yeah.
We've made significant strides in understanding and treating mental illness, but those ethical considerations around patient autonomy, informed consent are as important as ever.
And we see in the source material just how deeply this experience affects you, even before the actual treatment. You feel betrayed. Your trust in Dr. Nolan is shattered.
Right, and this raises another important point. Even if Dr. Nolan genuinely believed that she was acting in your best interests, her actions had a profound impact on your sense of self and your overall well-being. That betrayal of trust can be just as damaging as the treatment itself.
Yeah, it's a complex situation, and it makes me wonder about the long-term consequences. Even if the shock therapy was successful in alleviating your symptoms, at what cost?
The source material doesn't give us those answers, but it forces us to grapple with that difficult question. How do we balance the potential benefits of treatment with the potential for harm?
And who gets to decide where that line is drawn? These are questions that are relevant in any era, aren't they? It feels like we're left with more questions than answers, at this point. We're with you on the brink of another shock treatment, but this time the context is so different.
Yeah, the experience at Kaplan was almost abstract, like a ritual that you observed from a distance, but this time it's deeply personal, It's colored by your experience at Belsize, by the shattered trust, by the feeling of betrayal.
You initially saw Belsize as this haven for recovery, a place for the nearly well. But how do you think this experience, this broken promise, is going to change your perception of Belsize?
It's as if the curtain has been pulled back, and you're seeing the reality of the institution. It's no longer a stepping stone to a normal life, but another battleground in your struggle with mental illness.
And what about your relationship with Dr. Nolan? We've talked about the shattered trust, but can that be repaired? How will you navigate that relationship going forward?
That's the heart of the dilemma, isn't it? She holds so much power over your life within Belsize, yet you can no longer see her as a reliable guide on your path to recovery.
One thing that really struck me throughout this chapter was the contrast between the outward appearances of the other patients and your internal turmoil. They seem so well adjusted, so carefree, while you're wrestling with these really intense emotions.
Yeah, it highlights the invisible nature of mental illness, doesn't it? It can be so easily masked behind a facade of normalcy.
And that can be incredibly isolating. You start to feel like you're the only one struggling, that no one truly understands what you're going through.
Right. It makes me think back to that incident with the magazine photo. Those seemingly harmless assumptions from the other patients, the way they jump to conclusions.
It just reinforces that fear of being misjudged.
Yeah.
Even in a place that's designed for understanding.
And it's compounded by the way that the staff interact with you, The nurse's casual cruelty, her dismissive attitude, it's dehumanizing.
Do you think this reflects a broader societal view of mental illness at the time?
I think it's a reflection of an era when mental illness was often misunderstood, stigmatized, viewed as a personal failing rather than a legitimate medical condition.
So as we leave you at this really pivotal moment facing another round of shock treatment, we're left to grapple with these really complex questions. Will this treatment be different? Will you find a way to reclaim your agency, to have a voice in your own care?
And perhaps the biggest question of all, what does true recovery look like for you? Is it simply a matter of symptom management, or is there a deeper healing that needs to take place?
We don't have those answers, but this deep dive has given us a lot to consider. As you continue the journey through this book, pay attention to your own reactions. How does your understanding of mental illness and its treatment evolve with each chapter?
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. There's always more to explore, to question, to learn. Keep diving deep.
Thanks for joining us.